Sentry mode activated. Target acquired.
Hey there, hunters. So today is gonna be my first of probably a few videos on Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries. Like, I've been streaming this game for a little bit and I've been playing it for like a year or so now. But now that I've had some time to finish the DLC that came out in September, I finally wanted to just talk about it and voice some opinions on the game. So let's just dive into that. So Mechwarrior 5 is not a new game. It originally came out on the Epic Games Store back in like 2019, I believe, and only recently made its way to Steam. So I'm not surprised that the player base is small. On top of that, the Battletech universe where Mechwarrior takes place is very niche as it is. Pretty much just boomer gamers are aware of it at this point. Now, what I'm getting at is that it's not a popular game, but not just because it has difficulties reaching any audience not already familiar with the franchise, unfortunately. God, I'm not even sure where to begin with this one. I'm just going to start with the negatives on why, people don't play the game. So, Mechwarrior 5 isn't exactly a new, well-polished game from PGI, who's made the last few Battletech games. It's very much an asset flip derived from Mechwarrior Online, which came out back in like 2011 or 2012, taking all the Inner Sphere mechs, equipment, UI, and most of the overall game mechanics and functions, and just kind of making it into a single-player game. While it's not exactly a bad idea on paper, it was pretty much scuffed at launch. The story was very bare bones for your single player game, with some god-awful writing, very bad voice acting, and effectively no character development or any tension at all. It felt like the story was just there to say that, hey, it's got a campaign mode. Now, the actual missions for the game were all very plain and uninspired as well. Most revolved around a typical, walk here, kill these guys kind of thing. And like the free play non-campaign missions were effectively the exact same thing as like the campaign missions, minus some dialogue at the start. Quite literally, there was like 5 mission types. It was like demolition, which is just walk at a base and shoot the buildings. Raid, which was walk to a lot of different bases and shoot the buildings. Defense, which is stand at the base and kill enemies. Warzone, which is walk to the base and kill enemies. And assassination, which is walk to many bases and kill specific enemies. While not the worst variety of missions, I don't think I've seen worse mission variety in any game, but I'm sure there's some out there. The real problem here was that the biome and map layouts were all identical, with basically a different color scheme painted over it. It was a random map size with the same cookie cutter, like tiny bases dropped off here and there. It was very, very boring, and everything felt very samey. The saving grace was that the game does have co-op play, and that does always make things more fun, but even that was very broken at launch, though it is better now. Now, what got me initially hooked into the game, other than the fact that I'm just a huge Battletech fan, is the actual big stompy robot gameplay loop, which is pretty good. I like how piloting the mechs feel. The slower paced combat is something I actually enjoy, because like mecha games right now aren't really popular, and most of them are just very fast anime based mech games, kind of like Gundam feeling, and they feel a lot less like piloting a giant mechanical construct and more like you're just a flying metal human with jets, boosters, and crazy articulation. I think the last mech game I really enjoyed outside of the Mechwarrior franchise was probably Armored Core, which started out fairly slow, but Armored Core 3 through 5 got progressively faster and the screen was full of all sorts of clutter, and it just didn't go well for me. Didn't enjoy it. But hey, FromSoft, can we get a new Armored Core, please? I would love to have that return. Anyway, where was I? So outside of the big slumpy robot gameplay, there are a few other mechanics which are rather fun. Since you're managing a mercenary group, you have to manage things like money, pilots, faction reputation, maintaining your mechs, and traveling across the Inner Sphere completing your routine boring missions. I like the sim aspect of maintaining resources and such in games like this, however most of it is pretty much inconsequential and very shallow. Like pilot AI is garbage regardless of their skill level in each category, all they really do is help them take less damage or deal more damage, which is kind of boring. Money becomes trivial as you earn and progress, and there's never really a threat to losing a mech since you can just repair it right up, and there's parts all over the place, or you just restart the mission. One of the smaller niche things that I really like about the game though is the timeline. It very much follows the actual lore and the Battletech timeline. Like, time passes as you travel in your inner sphere, and it keeps track of the current date and year, which will provide you with current events so you can see what's actually happened politically or what new tech is being developed and such. So equipment and mechs also follow their lore-based release times and locations, so you can find new tech and new mech variants in specific parts of the inner sphere after certain dates that it was manufactured, which does help drive the game forward if you're in the know. People who are unfamiliar with this and have no idea that new weaponry will be unlocked after certain dates probably aren't going to have very much fun with the game because it doesn't tell you that anywhere. I like the idea that the game was trying to execute, but all of it kind of fell short, like really short. And I wish I could say that I'm surprised, but PGI kind of milked Mechwarrior Online's player base super hard and the franchise as a whole, so I wasn't really expecting a whole lot from them, unfortunately. So the initial impressions at launch for Mechwarrior 5 were pretty bad, and the game was shallow, and it kind of fizzled pretty hard, and being on Epic Games Store didn't help. So let's fast forward to today, and why I'm still actually playing the game after all the negative feedback on it. First is that the game did have 2 DLCs added since then. They're not exactly the cheapest things around either. Base game is still $30 on Steam, which I think is pretty fair, but the 2 DLCs are $20 and $15 each, so like, it's still a full game price. And I can genuinely say that I would not recommend anyone pick up the game and the DLC unless you happen to be a really big fan of big stompy robots and you play on PC and maybe you already had the base game. But if you do end up getting it, it's still a huge improvement. So the Heroes of the Inner Sphere and the Legends of the Kestrel Lancers provide new campaign missions, and the Lancers one is actually pretty good. They obviously include a lot of new mechs, new chassis, and new variants for existing stuff. They've added melee combat to the game, and I can't recall ever having melee combat in Mechwarrior games, so that's kind of cool. There's a lot of new biomes, a lot of new mission types, and better performance across the board. Now that's not to say they fixed everything with the DLC, because they didn't, and since it's paid DLC, it's kind of annoying that there's still some lingering issues that I really wish were resolved. Things like map biome generation is still the same, where it's the same cookie cutter layouts with just a theme slapped over for a color, and a single base somewhere on the map with the same base layouts. Like, it's all pretty samey. While the campaign missions do step away from this a little bit, all the free play missions still feel very cookie cutter. AI got improved a slightly bit, it feels, but it's still just god awful, especially for your lance. I mean, trying to command your allies to do things gets really frustrating because they never really leave your side. You can't have them hold a point or anything. And there's no real looming threat for failure or losing a mech. So if you've made it this far, I know what you're thinking. I've said nothing but bad things about this game, and I've made 0 arguments in favor of it outside the fact that I just happen to like slow stompy robots. Yeah, that is still true. I still don't recommend this game to most people, sadly. However, there is one saving grace for this game, which is obvious. It's a saving grace for any PC game: mods. Surprisingly, the modding community for Mechwarrior 5 is hard at work and constantly updating and pumping out new mods for the game. Like, there's the team behind Merc-Tech that's completely overhauled the game in every way you can imagine. Mech customization, harder difficulties, better melee combat, penalty for losing things, all sorts of things that can be turned off and on at your preference. Sylvie, who's done a great job of adding mech and tech into the games. Coyote, who made a pretty much mandatory mission pack to expand the variety of missions and bring some life into these free patrol missions. CSZ, who's made clan tech, mech bay overhauls, and mech variants, and Orion, who did the AI overhaul to make your lance perform in specific roles that you assign to the mech. Vaughn with the Vaughn biomes mod adds dozens of new biomes to the game to spice some things up visually. Like, I can go on and on about the hundreds of mods and modders putting in countless of hours of effort into this game, but they've definitely saved this game. The amount of love for the franchise really shows when the modders stepped up to actually put in the work. All of the complaints I've had for this game can be pretty much solved by a mod somewhere. Sure, modding will definitely cause some problems to the game if you're not careful. You need to balance your mods and find out which are compatible with what, which will involve a lot of testing and crashing for sure. But I finally gotten to the point where my game doesn't crash at all anymore, and I've got like 15 plus mods on. The only lingering complaint I still have after all this is that the map generation is still poor. Like, I need to find a way to spice in the way missions are set up or just how the maps are generated, because it still feels very cookie cutter on most missions. At least as far as the layout of like enemy bases and such, but it's definitely a lot nicer. So with the DLC bringing the game to Steam, the blood, sweat, and tears of the modding community actually making the game pretty fun, and me being a sucker for giant stompy robots, there's still some bias here, and I still wouldn't recommend picking it up for other people, but I'm actually having a lot of fun with this game now. Like, it feels pretty good to play. The gameplay just feels right, and sure, there are some issues with the game outside of the immediate gameplay, but at its core, Mechwarrior definitely delivers in its big stompy robot action, and then it's just being propped up by mods. So yeah, I mean, that's basically all for me though. Thank you all for listening, and good luck out there, hunters.